Hey guys, we are doing another Top 5 Tuesdays for you, and this is a series I do in collaboration with the Glam Dr. Mona Khan. She is a very good friend of mine and a fellow YouTuber. I will link to her channel and her video down in my description box. Definitely check it out. And this week we are talking about our top 5 neutral eyeshadow palettes. So if you're interested in hearing what my picks are for this week, then just keep on watching. All right, this first palette I'm picking is actually a quad, and this is the newest one to my collection, and I've been talking about this quite a bit in my past few videos, but this is the quad from Chanel. This is the Clair Obscur number 308, and this came out with their Le Mat de Chanel Fall 2018 collection, but I have just fallen in love with this little palette. I think you can get a very nice, complete, everyday, sophisticated eye look from just these 4 colors, and I think what is the best part about these shadows is the quality of these eyeshadows. These are the same formula as the mattes that have come out recently. I think this matte formula was introduced in fall 2016 with the Rouge collection. The quad that came out for that season I think is like the Can Deux et Experience quad, and it had like that deep red in there. It was like a warmer kind of version of this quad, but I remember picking that up and not having terribly high expectations. Some Chanel shadows I like, some I don't. They're usually very kind of glittery and sparkly, very powdery, but these are extremely creamy. I want to say they're creamier than the Natasha Denona shadows, so I think there's also like a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to really creamy shadows, because sometimes they can seem like they don't blend as easily as like more powdery shadows, but the formula is just gorgeous, and these colors are just so beautiful and so wearable. And so you can see, because they are so creamy, even though they are a matte shadow, you can see that there's just a little bit of like a natural kind of like glisten to them. And it gives the mattes a little bit more life, which I happen to like. So those are the 4 shades in the quad. And now this palette is the one that I pull out if I happen to be using maybe another palette that doesn't have like a transition shade that I like. I will go ahead and reach for this one. It's just perfect. I just love it. The next palette I picked is another quad, and this is another one that I talk about fairly often. This is the Tom Ford Coco Mirage quad. And people always ask me, would I pick this over the Chanel? They're just different. The Tom Ford formula is a little bit more powdery and not quite as creamy as the Chanel. And when I say that, I feel like I'm putting the Tom Ford quad down, but it's just different. It really is about your personal taste. It really is about what you prefer, what types of like shadows you prefer, because there are plenty of people that find more powdery shadows easier to work with, easier to blend, and therefore just like a nicer shadow for them. And a lot of people love like really creamy, buttery shadows, which I find sometimes can be a little bit difficult to blend because they are so thick. You kind of have to like work them a little bit more. So it all comes down to preference. I like them just the same. The lightest shade in here is lighter than the one in the Chanel, but let me go ahead and swatch these. These shadows, while they are you know, I would say a little bit more powdery than the Chanel, they are incredibly soft, incredibly pigmented, and they just work beautifully on the lid. So these are all mattes, and then this one is a matte that has a little bit of like glitter in there. I just never ever go wrong with those 2 quads, the Coco Mirage and the Clair Obscur. And then next I have the palette that I feel like is the quintessential neutral palette, and this is the Visiart neutral matte palettes, the number 01. And here, I mean, we have a shade that I want to say is a little bit warm, but if you cover that one up, every other shade is very neutral. This one I think is just something that is needed in a palette like this, especially since this is geared towards makeup pros. This is something that I think you can blend in with these other colors to kind of warm it up just a little bit if you need it. And then the same with like these 2 colors. They're a little bit on the cooler side, but I think it just balances out this entire palette really nicely. And so I think it is a really great neutral matte palette. And so when it comes to formula, the Visiart shadows definitely are a little bit more powdery than I think any of the other shadows I'm going to be talking about, but they have such a high concentration of pigment in them. They work beautifully. Let me just swatch a few of these. They work really beautifully. These blend out like a dream. And I think what I love so much about these shadows is that you can actually like mix them. You can mix like a visiart red and a visiart yellow and get orange. And a lot of times with shadows, you can't do that. A lot of times you'll probably hear a lot of YouTubers say this, like, oh, the colors kind of muddy together. And that happens, I think, more often than not. I think it's rare that you get a shadow that you can actually mix like paint. And so having colors like this and this in a palette like this will really help kind of cool or warm up the other colors because they just mix so easily. This is just such a great palette. These shadows are just like workhorse shadows. They work the same every single time I use them. It almost doesn't matter which brush I have. It doesn't matter if I have primer down, if I don't have primer down, concealer down, you know, powder down first, like all those things that I feel like I need to kind of prep for, you know, with other shadows, just sort of your regular steps. I feel like with Visiart shadows, you just don't need to do that. They just blend perfectly. Their mattes are outstanding, absolutely outstanding. Next, I have a palette from an indie company, and this is from a YouTuber, Sona Gasparian, and this is her Identity palette. I love this palette, and I was like, is this a neutral palette? Like, I couldn't really decide because obviously we have a pretty warm color here. This one's pretty cool, but I feel like the rest are pretty neutral. I mean, I guess you could say these are a little bit on the warmer side, but I want to say overall, I would consider this a neutral palette. The formula of these shadows are very, very soft, are very, very velvety soft. Here are some of the mattes in the palette. I think this palette also is laid out really nicely. There are 12 shadows altogether, and there are 6 mattes and 6 shimmers. It's just balanced really nicely. So here are some of the mattes. I mean, it's just pigmented. They're very, very soft. So personally, I have to be careful not to pick up too much shadow when I go in with a brush. I have to tap it off. Again, I think that's what most people prefer on top of it being like hard to pick up. That you don't want either. So they're just really soft. They're really easy to blend. They really, really work beautifully. I don't think they're quite as like creamy as the Chanel ones. And in comparison to the Tom Ford, they're also a little bit more powdery, but I think they're creamier than the Visiart, and they're just beautiful. Let me swatch some of these metallic shades because these are stunning. Look at those metallic shades, just beautiful. You can probably see on my swatches like how soft this formula is. It's beautiful. So I love this palette, and when I first got this, I did a demo of it. You guys, you know, seem to really, really like it or were very curious about this palette. This was a long time ago, so I apologize. And I wanted to do like a 3 looks, 1 palette thing. So of course, time got away from me, and I felt like, oh, maybe the time had passed. But if you guys are interested in a 3 looks, 1 palette, this is like one of those great palettes to do a video like that for. So if you're interested in that, definitely let me know. I will do that for you because in August, I am definitely trying to catch up on videos that I haven't been able to film over the past few months. So anyway, let me know down below in the comment section. And then last but not least is a palette that I hauled, and then I just never really kind of talked about it after that. But this is a great neutral palette, and I have used it quite a bit. I've taken it on a couple trips with me because I was like, I don't know what looks I'm going to need or whatever. And so this came in really, really handy. This is the Bare Minerals Nudes palette, Sensual Nudes. I'm not exactly sure the full name of this, but this is what the cover looks like. So it just says nudes across the top. And then here is the palette. So there are 14 shades in here. There's a mixture of mattes and shimmers, as you can see. And if you guys don't know, but I am a huge fan of Bare Minerals eyeshadows. I think they perform so nicely. I am just a big sucker for Bare Minerals shadows. Let me just go ahead and swatch some for you. Some of these mattes. These feel very, very similar to the Identity palette that I just showed you. So here's some mattes. Here's some shimmers. The mattes in here are a little bit more creamy, I think, than the Tom Ford or the Visiart. There is a little bit more of like a creamy thickness texture to them. That was a bad color to pick because that was like my skin color. Let me do something else. Here is another color. they're just really beautiful shadows. They perform really well. They're just really easy to use. I almost find them to be mistake proof. I feel like this is a great kind of like beginner palette, and they're long lasting. I find when I use Bare Mineral shadows, they last all day. I could say that for all the shadows that I just mentioned. Actually, these are all very long wearing shadows. I don't feel like they fade by the end of the day, but I definitely have some shadows in my collection that are not known for their longevity, at least not in my head. But this is just a lovely everyday palette. And this is, to me, like if you are a beginner, you've never used eyeshadows before, you really want to get into it, you don't know anything about color, you don't know the tone of your skin, you know, are you cool, are you warm? I would recommend this palette because I think it would go for just about anyone. I think it would work for people up to maybe like a medium skin tone. I think if you have a darker skin tone, at that point, some of these shadows just won't kind of show up on your skin tone, or they just won't be effective. But if you have a light to medium, up to medium skin tone, I think that this would work really beautifully. And I love that there's a matte like highlight color and a matte black color. It just really completes the palette. I think it's just a great palette to have in your collection or to start with. All right, so that's it for this video. Those are my top 5 neutral eyeshadow palettes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out the Glam Dr. Mona Khan's video for this week. Again, the link is down in my description box. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below with some of your favorite neutral eyeshadow palettes are. I love a good neutral eyeshadow palette. I feel like it's like the black dress in your wardrobe collection. You can just never have enough. So anyway, let me know down below in the comment section, and I will see you in my next video.